A man refuses the easiest escape. The guards offer him a path to freedom. He doesn't take. I've stood in rooms where people made their final choices. Athens, 399 BC, the courtroom falls silent. Socrates has been sentenced to death. The charges are absurd, corrupting youth, impiety. But here's what matters. Escape is arranged. His friends have paid for it. A boat waits. The guards are willing. All he has to do is walk out the door and vanish into exile. He refuses. To understand why, you need to rewind. Socrates wasn't always facing execution. For 70 years, he walked the streets of Athens asking questions nobody wanted asked. Not the kind that have answers. The kind that expose the gap between what people claim to know and what they actually understand. He questioned politicians, priests, poets, and every single one of them walked away feeling smaller, not because Socrates was cruel, because he was relentless. He had a method, I'd call it intellectual combat without mercy. He'd ask you to define virtue. You'd answer. He'd ask a follow-up. Your answer contradicted your first one. He'd smile. Then he'd ask again. This made him famous and dangerous. Powerful people don't like being exposed as frauds. By the time he's 70, Athens is exhausted by him. The city's been through war, plague, political collapse. They want stability, not a gadfly asking uncomfortable questions, so they put him on trial. But here's the thing I've learned covering conflicts. The moment of truth rarely looks dramatic when it's happening. Socrates doesn't rage. He doesn't beg. He sits in a cell. His friends visit. They're panicked. They've bribed the jailer. The door is open. Socrates can leave tonight. He tells them no, not because he's suicidal, not because he's a martyr seeking glory. He gives reasons, and the reasons are what Jacques-Louis David tried to capture in his painting The Death of Socrates, created nearly 2,000 years later. David understood something most people miss. Socrates' refusal wasn't about dying. It was about staying true to what he'd actually said. See, Socrates had spent his entire life arguing that the laws of Athens were sacred, not because they were perfect, but because they were the foundation of collective life. He taught that obedience to law, even unjust law, was the glue holding civilization together. If he fled, he'd be a hypocrite. He'd be proving everything he'd ever said was performance. I've interviewed soldiers who stayed at their post when they could have run. I've asked them why. The answer is almost always the same, because leaving would mean I was something other than what I said I was. It's not about honor. It's about coherence. Your life has to match your words, or your words become lies. Socrates goes further. He says that escaping would damage the city itself. If he violates the law to save his life, he's teaching everyone else that principle bends when survival is on the line. He's poisoning the foundation. He'd be complicit in making Athens weaker, not stronger. This is where most people stop listening. They think Socrates is being naive, that he's romanticizing obedience. But that's not what he's saying. He's not saying all laws are good. He's saying that the alternative to law, the rule of whoever is strongest, is worse. And if you claim to believe that, you can't abandon it the moment it costs you. David's painting shows Socrates hours before his execution. He's surrounded by disciples. Some are crying. Socrates is calm, pointing upward, toward the forms, toward the eternal. His hand is steady. He's already decided. The hemlock cup sits nearby. He'll drink it soon. What David captured, what makes that painting endure, is the moment when abstract principle becomes concrete action, when philosophy stops being words and becomes a body. Socrates isn't performing courage. He's living it. Now, you might think this is ancient history. It's not. Every day, people face smaller versions of this choice. Compromise your principles to keep your job. Stay silent to avoid conflict. Bend the rules to get ahead. The stakes are lower, sure, but the structure is identical. I've covered enough wars to know the people who break under pressure aren't weak. They're people who never decided what they actually believed. When the cost gets high, they discover they don't have a foundation. Socrates had one. He'd examined it for 70 years. The hardest part of David's painting, the part most people miss, is that Socrates never claims to be a hero. He's not seeking martyrdom. He's simply refusing to become someone else. That distinction matters. It's the difference between choosing death and refusing to choose a lie. So what does this mean for you? Not that you should seek suffering, but that the easiest path forward, compromise, silence, adaptation, has a hidden cost. It costs you coherence. It costs you the ability to trust yourself. And once you lose that, everything else becomes negotiable. Socrates drank the hemlock. His last words were about a small debt he owed, not about his trial, not about injustice, about a debt. He stayed true to the small things until the end. That's what made the big choice possible. A single painting, one moment, but it's a mirror. It asks, what would you refuse? What principle is worth the cost? And more importantly, have you actually decided, or will you decide when the pressure comes? Because that's when you'll find out who you really are. Subscribe. Each week, we explore how ancient philosophy reveals the architecture of a life worth living.